guarantee. So it looks like, if you just look at their assets, it looks like they're covering their liabilities. They owe customers $10 billion. It looks like they have $10 billion, but like really everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account. And during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League, just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch of very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer.
And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was, you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange deal, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had middleman because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then they're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this an
said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws? They never ended up doing that. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called, I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do the. I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z. What is that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on. It's this famous. I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things. It's insane. It's really. I almost wish.
Or something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, they're from the the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like it's almost to something worse. They're a guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode, and he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other people, or it's just like.
Well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, you do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild too. The whole scene was wild. What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. If you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. I
don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one, because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
I put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into me, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no, her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this
party.
That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah.
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like to expose, but like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about the FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like it was very opaque. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was balances, but oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. It's you find arc where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam
analogy for losing your house.
You know what's funny? Yeah.
You know, I mean, good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam this thing. So all this money's going in. And then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh. That's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
The problem is when the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral, and it just was kind of I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to like even before that I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred, is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. Fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused like scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, you know, it's almost used $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're like, call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet?
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, you know, those multiplayer games, those, you know, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like a...
I think it's a... Is it a MOBA? I need to go start trading with it unless, you know, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But, like, they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. What that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your...
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like that Sam had, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, you know, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, you know, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, he thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, if I roll, you think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, you know, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. I mean, he was, you know, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the like returns were insane, but reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety, it's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to, where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like You put the
go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new. The son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was a person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems. But shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in
annoying? So
we don't need that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're a publicly traded success. 2 months. You're going to be making 5 figures a month, 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and...
It means playing League of Legends while on investor calls. Like, at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
On calls. You could hear, even actually, money to a politician on my behalf, you're a straw donor. You're not really a donor. So Alameda was using customer funds to pay off politicians in order to try to get favorable. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader, such as FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where honestly you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? Or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. Sam goes, oh, you won our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers?
And a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that he felt like he could do.
They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win. You're the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did everything. There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, oh, hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So I saw this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video, just service that said, you cannot move, when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. It never was hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was always there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I don't invest. That's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few.
He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out. I'm this guy who's going to maximize good in the world. And that was his reason for working all the time. I mean, that's the justification to be hopped up on amphetamines. It's maximize productivity, maximize human happiness. you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games.
Yeah,
and that's why I lost the money.
But
involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019, God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So he just really taken that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
we don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went chemtrails?
Let me say this. If it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I study that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is, it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically, it's almost impossible to trace.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos, all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? And that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had, so he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. Like, it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us. Right, nobody's this stuff, and you start to have repeat occurrences. Like I just cover stuff all the time, and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago. I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at, and he said, there were some margin trading accounts, and I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you, and all they wanted assets. You can check yourself. Like I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
That sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. So before, it's like, if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1, and then you're sending $1 to all... a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business, and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that?
So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people... But ultimately, a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why?
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
Most of this 10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
You know, there were things that were coming out, like questions about, you know, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So like the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill, like was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to move it. That's what FTX. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me
down, because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Yeah, somebody found out about this God mode, and so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, and basically like, shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down. Because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on. Let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, and then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not. Maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. Now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. Crypto is... Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So like, look at the Turkish lira. What I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, like was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're actually campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, how you're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's
a whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
There's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing interviews. It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Like they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance? Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to, he's doing interviews with that. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does that work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cat. Might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
You believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. Who's Ethereum? What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate. But so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets. And he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to do companies, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
Break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put it. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt, and he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? Like, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, I'll have to. My feeling is offshore entities should not be. They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, I don't know. It's ours, and I'd go because it was like my friends said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's okay, to their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people, right people in charge who are going to take the fall, you resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who comes. He's the son of two Harvard lawyers. Smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong too. Some reactions, but not much. what I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and, you know, with regulators, they were all Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed. And CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this, like, battle between them. And ultimately, he's like, well, you know, like, think of it like a box. And, you know, you tell a bunch of investors, you know, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. We, you know, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this.
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying to.
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
Give you this yield. He starts explaining like this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately, Matt Levine's like, yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense.